and let's talk about infrastructure, because it is, it's kind of, we don't really know what's going on. There is a deal so far that we know of the $1.2 trillion stimulus, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure plan. That's the bipartisan plan. They have a deal on that as of like super recently, yesterday or the day before. Negotiators have come to a deal, and I'm gonna pull up a breakdown of where the money is going for that deal. I should have had this pulled up earlier. I thought I had the correct link, but it was just a link to this guy's Twitter page. Here it is. So I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Shali Kapoor. He's a journalist for NBC and CNBC. He's done pieces, White House correspondent, all that kind of stuff. So per the White House, this is coming from the White House, the $1.2 trillion or whatever deal. We have $40 billion for roads and bridges, $11 billion for safety, $39 billion for transit, $66 billion for Amtrak and rails, $7.5 billion for electric vehicle charging, $5 billion for clean buses, $17 billion for ports, $25 billion for airports, $50 billion for water resilience, $55 billion for drinking water, $65 billion for broadband. That's a good thing. $21 billion for environmental remedies, maybe? I don't know. And $73 billion for clean energy. And then he follows up the tweet by saying, and this looks like the core of the surface transportation piece, per the White House. The bipartisan infrastructure deal will invest $110 billion of new funds for roads, bridges, and major projects and reauthorize the surface transportation program for the next 5 years. So there we go. We have a deal. $550 billion of new spending for infrastructure. The remainder is going to be, we don't really know what the remainder of how it's going to be paid for is. I know that was a big thing for Republican negotiators in this bipartisan bill, was to have it completely paid for. $550 billion for new spending, which is new money that they're going to print. They're going to use leftover COVID funds, I think. And then also what we talked about, not last week, but the week before, that asset recycling, which I just don't agree with at all. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it sounds like a good idea, selling off public works to the private sector. I don't know if privatizing public infrastructure is a good idea in the long run. I don't think, with the amount of greed and corruption and what big money does, and having a private entity control something like an interstate or a water plant or an airport, having most likely a private equity, large Wall Street investment firm or something like that, control something so vital to everyday life. I mean, given the track record, I don't think that's a good idea. At first, when I heard that they were going to use unused COVID funds, I was okay with it. But I can't remember who said it in an interview or what, but I heard that, and I don't know how much truth there is to this, but the COVID funds that are supposedly left over are for small businesses and restaurants. And the idea when that money was passed in the beginning of the year was to use it throughout this year, not just pump it all into the economy at once and then whatever's left over we'll use for something else. It was supposed to be to keep the train moving throughout this year, and pump it into the economy when it's needed, every couple of months. Looks like that's not going to happen. And it looks like they're going to just use that for additional funding, which, I mean, I don't really know, depending like the segment we did in the very beginning, if the CDC decides it wants to double down on this whole, hey, even though you're vaccinated in certain areas, you still got to wear a mask. And I just saw on Twitter today of a press conference from the White House Reporter was asking if now that they have to mask up again, are they going to rule out, lockdowns and school closures? And the press secretary kind of dodged the question and didn't really answer it fully and just said, we'll listen to the scientists, which they're not doing because 2 months ago it was fine to take off masks and the vaccines worked against the variants, but now they're going back on that. So whose scientists are you trusting here? So maybe we are going to need that extra money later down the line if lockdowns happen again. Now, I don't think they will. I think that'll be political suicide if they decide to do lockdowns again, because 2022 midterms are right around the corner. And with the House so close to 50-50 and the Senate literally being 50-50, locking down and shutting down the economy again, forget it if you want to get reelected. Forget it. So this is very kind of scary. This whole privatization of public works for, paying for this infrastructure plan. I know people like Joe Manchin and Rob Portman wanted the whole thing to be paid for, which I don't really agree with to begin with, because in my humble opinion, you can deficit spend infrastructure. Maybe not the fucking, $10 trillion that we wanted to in the beginning. But, if you're not willing to raise tax on fucking Amazon or Facebook or FedEx or a Walmart or fucking any major national corporation, Walmart, McDonald's, all of, these oil companies, Microsoft, First Energy, Exxon, all of these companies that have made trillions of dollars collectively over the pandemic. A lot of them don't pay federal tax anyway. We saw from the ProPublica leaks. And we've known for a while, the IRS even did a report last year, or was it the beginning of this year? Something like that, highlighting like 12 or 13 American multinationals that don't pay federal tax. And even Joe Biden has said publicly, and in the speech he gave the other day in Pennsylvania, that there are corporate entities out there that don't pay federal tax, and we need them to pay federal tax. Well, we can't enforce that unless the IRS has funding. And Republicans, one of the first things they stripped out of the bipartisan infrastructure plan was the $40 billion for the IRS, because they just simply don't want to raise taxes on corporations. It goes back to the whole trickle-down Reagan-era economics that doesn't fucking work. It just does not work. But we still want to do it anyway. So the alternative is asset recycling and using leftover funds. I don't know. And another thing that could blow the whole thing up, we know that Kyrsten Sinema, we still don't know where she feels on the reconciliation plan. Because remember, this is a two-bill thing. This is a two-bill system. There is the bipartisan $1.2 trillion, and as of right now, there's the infrastructure reconciliation package by the Democrats in the Senate that's $3.5 trillion. That has a lot more good in it, in my view. There's extending the child tax credit until 25. There's, more broad climate change, the PRO Act, all this sort of stuff. And the Senate being so 50-50, no Republicans are going to vote for that because it's too much money for them. If Sinema or Manchin or one of these corporate Democrats decides to vote against it, it's fucked. The whole thing is blown up. And Bernie Sanders just recently did a interview with Crystal Ball. It's a real person. And he said that if he has anything to do with it, which he does because he's the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, like the third most powerful person in Washington at the moment, he said if he has anything to do with it, there will not be a bipartisan bill if the Democrats don't all come together and agree on a reconciliation package. So they have an agreement on the bipartisan bill. And Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader of the Democrats, has said that as soon as the bipartisan bill goes through, they'll get to work on the reconciliation package. They're saying that they want to do it before the August recess, which is in like 2 weeks or something. So they don't have a whole lot of time to get this through. And just knowing how long a legislative process takes, you can forget it. It's not going to be until September, maybe even October, for both of these to go through, because now that they have a deal on the bipartisan infrastructure, it's got to go through both chambers. They got to vote, they got to debate, then it's got to go through both chambers again, and then it's got to go to the president. And then the reconciliation package has to happen. Reconciliation package has to be approved by the Senate, which they need 50 votes. They're going to get 50 Democrats. Hopefully, if Manchin and Sinema can pull their weight, then Kamala Harris says go for it. Then it's got to go to the House. They get their amendments and their floor time and their vote. Then it's got to go back to the Senate to be agreed on again. And then it goes to the fucking president to sign. It's going to be a long process to get this done. And Schumer is saying that they're going to get it done before August. Before the recess, that is. And I just don't see that happening unless they're going to work 24/7. Like, what, are you not going to sleep, dog? Fucking majority of the people in Congress could be my great-grandfather, for Christ's sake. There's no way that it gets done before the August recess. There's just no way. I wanted to show this tweet from Scott Bixby. This is a poll right from the New York Times, and it's got two graphs that show before the bipartisan plan was cut down and after the bipartisan plan was cut down. So the original proposal was $2.6 trillion, and it has this nice pie chart that has everything broken down in the billions for what it would do to the economy. So R&D and manufacturing is a huge chunk, 556. Housing, schools, and buildings is another huge chunk at 387. Home and community-based care is another huge chunk at 400. Then it moves into clean energy tax credits, water infrastructure, broadband, power infrastructure, resiliency and water storage, and then it moves over to roads and bridges and railways and electric vehicles. And then the next slide is the $500 billion plan, which is what we have now in new spending. And the R&D and manufacturing, the housings and schools, the home-based community care, the clean energy tax credits, all of that was cut to zero. And the roads and bridges part of it, the railways, the waterways, electric vehicles, airports, power infrastructure, water, broadband, water infrastructure was significantly shrunken down. So I'll show that graphic on screen if you're watching the video, and then I'll put a highlight up as well if you're not subscribed. Do that. Subscribe if you're not, because you can see the whole show uncut. But anyway... So yeah, this was a very cool graphic to look at from the New York Times, just showing how much was cut out of the original proposal of this infrastructure package. And this is the bipartisan one. So this went from $2.6 trillion down to $1.2 trillion in total. And I'm just thinking, if the original plan was agreed upon plus the reconciliation package, you would have seen significant transformation within the next 8 to 10 years in America when it comes to public infrastructure. But unfortunately, in Congress right now, we are going through a transitional period where we have people from the new generations using new modern monetary theory and wanting bold action and change. And then we also have those who are still in Congress from the 70s and 80s about, the less you do, the more it works. The government, big government should not be a thing. Get government away from me. The less government does, the better, this and that. So, and, it's starting to phase into a newer generation. So who knows? I'm rambling about this because I really think that this was a missed opportunity. We could have, for my generation, and if I ever have kids, their generation could have been in a better position in context of infrastructure. We'll see if that $3.5 trillion reconciliation plan. We'll see what happens with that, because there is some legitimately good things in both plans. I mean, don't get me wrong, the bipartisan plan isn't what we hoped for. Neither's the reconciliation plan. We don't really know all the details about that yet. It's not finished. But the bipartisan plan, there's good things in there. 10 years ago, people weren't talking about broadband as infrastructure. 10 years ago, people weren't talking about electric vehicle charging stations as public infrastructure. Well, now we are, which is a good thing. We're moving in the right direction. Are we moving there fast enough, in my opinion? No. But we're moving there, which is good. And the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package has more for climate change. It has more for clean water. It has more help for families and children, universal pre-K, extending the child tax credit, all that good stuff. The PRO Act is in there as well, which is good, giving workers more power to unionize. So there are some good things to look forward to. It's not going to be the best case scenario, and it's going to take a lot longer than Washington is leading on. But hopefully it'll get passed this year. Hopefully in the fall. They can come together after the August recess and get this done, because we need it. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We are like 9th or 10th in the world for infrastructure, which is unacceptable for the most rich and prosperous country on earth. Also, in the reconciliation package, don't forget about the Senate parliamentarian. Talked about that person last week. If you don't know, go back and listen to it. It's too much to explain now. I'm about done with the show for today. But the parliamentarian, Biden and his administration has signaled that they're going to listen to the advice of the parliamentarian. And that means we could see things like the PRO Act, things like the child tax credit, stuff like that, universal pre-K. We could see those stripped out of this because the parliamentarian advises against it. In my view, that's not the way to go. I don't know why we have to listen to this archaic Senate procedure that's been, implemented at the founding of the country. It's a completely different country at this point. We don't need to listen to a parliamentarian, but that's just me. So we'll see what happens. It's looking like it's going to be a 6, 5.5 or 6 out of 10 sort of deal, which I guess is better than nothing, but it's not the best. So